Independence, freedom, country. These words are highly important to Ukrainians at any time, no matter whether it was 100 years ago or now. Ukrainians have been giving their lives for freedom and for their country for hundreds of years. Ukrainians have always wanted to live in their own, independent, one and only country, not torn apart. Today, we are going to plunge into our history again and go back in time. We will talk about the unity of Ukraine, about how important it is for the country. And obviously, we will start with the preconditions of this phenomenon. Due to historical circumstances, the Ukrainian people, who found themselves divided into several countries, sought independence and unification, especially during the springtime of nations of 1848-1849. Galicia became one of the centers of this unification. It happened that many nations needed Ukraine at that time, and even now, Russia doesn't imagine its future existence without Ukraine. Russians like to quote the executioner, Lenin, "Without Ukrainian bread, there is no Russia." Well, it's not just about the bread, but that's another story. For example, the Supreme Ruthenian Council, the first Ukrainian political organization in Galicia, in its manifesto of 10th May 1848, declared the unity of the 15 million Ukrainian people and their lands divided by the Russian and Austrian empires, and supported the national rights of other captive nations. Nevertheless, Ukrainians had a real opportunity to gain independence only decades later, during the First World War and the revolution in the Russian Empire that overthrew Tsarism. But as we know, the overthrow of Tsarism didn't bring any change to the situation. In early March 1917, Ukraine learned of the overthrow of the autocracy. This gave the Ukrainian people the impetus to launch a national liberation movement. In January 1918, the Fourth Universal proclaimed the state independence of the Ukrainian People's Republic. We would like to talk about the creation of the Ukrainian Rada. Kiev intelligentsia came up with the idea of creating a governing center in Ukraine. So on 3rd March 1917, a meeting of public, cultural and political organizations took place, organized by the Society of Ukrainian Progressives and the Ukrainian Social Democratic Labour Party. They set up a committee, but their opinions on Ukraine differed. Mykola Mikhnovsky and the independentists were in favor of declaring independence, while the autonomists, which included supporters of the TUP, were in favor of an autonomous republic in a federal union with Russia. Eventually, they were able to reach an agreement and unite. Unification with Russia is forever a terrible mistake. It's always blood and enslavement, which is absolutely contrary to the freedom-loving Ukrainian people. Russia represents terror in any form, and as you know, you cannot negotiate with terrorists. It only ends in tragedy. Unfortunately, this is still true today, because there are still a large number of people in Ukraine who are for negotiations with Moscovia. Now let's go back to the events of those times. On 17th March 1917, the Ukrainian Central Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine and the governing body of the national movement, was established. What is very important, Mikhailo Hrushevsky became the chairman, and its members included Volodymyr Vilnichenko, Serhiy Yefremov, Ivan Steshenko, Mykola Sadovsky and others. Direct speech of the Universal of the Central Council of Ukraine. We, the Ukrainian Central Rada, elected by the Congress of Peasants, Workers and Soldiers of Ukraine, cannot accept this. We will not support any wars, because Ukrainian nation wants peace, and democratic peace must come as soon as possible. There are exactly the same ideas as today, but unfortunately, then, as now, not everyone in the world supports Ukraine's desire for freedom. Generally speaking, the universals are very remarkable and important events for Ukraine's history. The universals of the Ukrainian Central Rada are documents of national importance, administrative and political acts, the proclamations. Naturally, it was the Ukrainian Central Rada that issued them. There were 4 universals issued in general, which defined the stages of the creation of the Ukrainian state, from autonomous to independent. On 7th November 1917, in Kiev, the 3rd Universal of the Ukrainian Central Rada proclaimed the Ukrainian People's Republic after the overthrow of the provisional government. In January 1918, the Force Universal proclaimed the state independence of the Ukrainian People's Republic. Direct speech. This was the day the Ukrainian state was created. An archivist about the Day of Unity of Ukraine. Every step of this process shaped the history of Ukraine and was faithful. Mikhailo Hrushevsky was the chairman of the Ukrainian Central Rada, and he made a speech before the proclamation of the Force Universal. Without a doubt, this is a prominent name in Ukraine's history. At that time, 39 deputies voted in favor of the Universal Declaration, 4 voted against, and 6 abstained. Once again, let's move to Western Ukraine and talk about the creation of the National Council. On 18th October 1918, the Ukrainian National Council was formed in Lviv, headed by Yevhen Petrushevich. The Rada took over power in the western Ukrainian lands and proclaimed that Eastern Galicia, Northern Bukovina, and Transcarpathia were constituted as a Ukrainian state. The Ukrainian National Rada announced its intention to create a national statehood and unite Ukrainians in a unified state. Thus, the idea of the unity of Ukrainian lands has become a state status. This is an absolutely legal and normal step for Ukrainians. On 1st December 1918, the initiators of the unification movement, the Ukrainian National Rada and the Directorate of the UPR, signed a pre-accession agreement in festive on their intention to unite the population and territories of both formations in one state. Both governments of the two republics find themselves obliged to put this state union into action as soon as possible, so that in the shortest possible period of time both states will form a truly indivisible state unit. The document stated. On 3rd January 1919, in Stanislav, today's Ivano-Frankivsk, a decision was made to unite the WUPR and the UPR, the Ukrainian National Rada, carrying out the right of self-determination of the Ukrainian people, solemnly proclaims the unification of the Western Ukrainian People's Republic with the Ukrainian People's Republic into one monolithic, sovereign People's Republic. The decision read. As a result, Rada established a plenipotentiary delegation to Kiev, which was tasked with finalizing the unification of the two states. According to the president of the council, Yevhen Petrushevich, both sides anonymously wanted to unite into one single country, and we are positive that this has been the dream of many generations of Ukrainians. The goals remain the same today. Ukraine is fighting for its independence and the right to exist at all. On the first anniversary of the proclamation of the Force Universal, 22nd January 1919, the final procedure for the establishment of the unity took place in Kiev. Thus, 22nd January is also the date of the acceptance of the Force Universal by the Ukrainian Central Rada in 1918. The Unification Act of 1919 played a major role in the historical memory of the Ukrainian nation. It helped to interpret Ukraine in its socio-political context only as a unified state. There was no public mention of the event of 22nd January 1919 during the Soviet years, but it remained vivid in the memory of the people. Russia's goal has always been to destroy Ukraine as a state. The problem was not with the leadership of the Union or Russia. The problem is the mentality of the Russians. The Russians are the ones who hate Ukraine. Neither Stalin or Putin are the ones who are wandering around Ukrainian homes killing everything alive. The population of Russia is the one who creates the demand for so-called special operations, that is, wars. Now let's turn our attention to the recent history of Ukraine, which is connected with the Day of Unity. On 21st January 1990, in honor of the 71st anniversary of the Unification Act, the People's Movement of Ukraine organized a human chain from Ivano-Frankivsk through Lviv to Kiev. It was one of the first massive until Soviet Ukrainian actions that put the end to the USSR, that allowed Ukraine to gain true independence. It proves once again how much a sovereign, united Ukraine is important to Ukrainians. The length of the chain exceeded 770 kilometers, and according to various estimates, between 500,000 and 3 million people attended the event. However, even when Ukraine was an independent state, this day faced many problems. The official celebration was established in 1999 by a decree issued by then current President Leonid Kuchma. On 30th December 2011, then current Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych issued a decree cancelling the Day of Unity and establishing a new celebration, the Day of Unity and Freedom of Ukraine. Prior to that, Freedom Day was celebrated on 22nd November and was established in 2005 by then President Viktor Yushchenko to mark the anniversary of the Orange Revolution. By merging two dates and introducing a new one, Viktor Yanukovych legally cancelled both of them. This was because Viktor Yanukovych was pro-Russian and wanted to actually hand over Ukraine to the Russians. This would be led to the creation of a Soviet Union 2.0. In the end, it would have been very dangerous for the West, because if the Russians had succeeded in capturing Ukraine, Russia would have become really strong. However, on 13th November 2014, the celebration was restored by the decree of Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. And incidentally, the problem is still there. If Ukraine does not withstand, Russia will not stop. Ukraine is part of Western civilization, and only with one voice we can withstand a common enemy. We are grateful to our Western allies for every cent and every weapon. We thank the Ukrainian Defense Forces for your heroic and effective work. Only together we are strong, and only together we'll win. Please share this video, subscribe the channel and leave a comment. The world needs to hear the Ukrainian perspective.